So I often get asked the question, how long should I make my first game? How complex should it be? Now, that's a great question, but it's also one of these how long is a piece of string question that is difficult to answer because there's quite a few variables and factors involved. What exactly do we mean by first? I mean, is it literally your first foray into coding, or is it your first commercial game? Now, that's a critical point of difference. Also, what genre does it fall into? As each gaming genre will have different expectations from the players. A casual puzzler having a vastly different level of complexity to, say, a adventure RPG game. And also, what platform is it being released on, if at all? As each platform, like Steam or itch.io or PlayStation Network, they have their own culture and expectations around that. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is it free or paid? And if paid, then what is the price point? Keeping in mind that not everything necessarily needs to be for sale. Some people can just create art for the sake of art. So to give a simple answer as to how complex your first game should be, I would say this. It should be not more complex than your ability to create it. Now, that's very important, and you got to kind of find that for yourself. You got to understand your own limitations. And not so easy that you aren't challenged by the process. You see, in order to grow, in order to develop at anything for that matter, whether it be game dev or something else, we need some kind of a resistance. You need to be challenged by the process and overcome those challenges. So if it's too easy, you're going to get bored. And if it's too hard, you're not going to be able to fulfill that. So you want to kind of find your range, understand it, and kind of push against that upper limit. And that's where the magic happens. So back to this idea of first game. Now, there's a big difference between making your first ever game project, as in literally your first attempt at making an interactive experience, and your first commercial project or serious project. And you may have heard of some of these success stories where a solo developer claimed it was their first game, and it became some, international $1 million success. And it being their first game became some kind of marketing point. No. Understand that those developers have likely been making countless little mini games and experiments prior to releasing that game. And what they're trying to say is it was their first commercial game. So it's a little bit misleading in a sense. And a lot of beginner developers who see these examples will often feel a little bit demoralized making comparisons with their own projects. Because you need to make games to learn how to make games, right? You can't just read a book and expect to become competent in game design and development. It's just like driving a car, or learning to drive a car, rather. You have to actually drive the damn thing. You can't just read a book about how to drive a car. You have to actually go through the motions. So just know when you see these kind of instances that there's usually an untold story being played out behind the scenes that is not being mentioned. That often looks a lot like your own that you are currently experiencing. There's also a bunch of these YouTubers that will make these, let's make a game in 24 hours or 48 hours type videos or whatever. And more often than not, these are not typically complete games, but rather tech demos or just experiments showcasing an idea or a system. They don't usually have menu screens or complete and coherent game loops. And it's not something you would be able to sell as is. So if you're watching this video, I will presume you are just starting out and probably still learning the dev tools and environments. If this is the case, you really need to climb the ladder of game dev in a rather linear fashion, so to speak. And that's to say, one step at a time, one logical step at a time, keeping the ego out of it. As tempting as it is to make a Zelda clone for your first ever game project before even fully understanding how to code or the tools at your disposal, it's not a great idea. I mean, it can be done, but you are likely to compromise a lot to get there. You see, during this early learning phase, you will be growing a lot as a designer and developer. And if your project development timeline is too long, you will end up outgrowing much of your early work as you progress. And that's happened to me a few times as well. You end up finding yourself unhappy with the early work you've created, and then you go and want to revise it over and over, caught in a loop, cannibalizing the project, like an Ouroboros, this snake that eats its own tail. It's a trap. So what is the approach to take when making your first game or trying to start out? Well, if you're completely new to game dev, you should be treating the tools like a toy, playing with them, experimenting with different mechanics, making things move, playing with physics and things like that, just familiarizing yourself with the territory, having fun. This phase can span from several days to months, or even years. It comes down to your individual personality and available time, really. For some, the learning process may take longer than others, because there is a steep conceptual learning curve to programming. But it's often been shown that those who take the most time to begin with and struggle with the most challenges come out very well on the other side. But don't be too hard on yourself if things aren't clicking the way you'd expect when you're trying to follow some programming tutorials. Trust the learning process. Your brain will eventually adapt to the patterns, and eventually the lights just turn on. Your brain just says, aha, I get it. All the accumulative effort that you've been kind of feeding the brain, it just lights up. So once you're comfortable with the absolute basics, you might then want to create some small, complete games. This means an experience which has like a start screen, maybe a scoring mechanism or a progression system, a fully playable loop, something that can be uploaded to itch.io or something that people can play and enjoy. And in this phase, you should be flying free like a bird without restraint. That is to say, you should not be locked down to any particular genre or system for too long, rather tasting and experimenting with many. I would recommend trying to make about 6 complete minigames over, say, a 24-month period of different genres, maybe like a car game or a platformer or a simple puzzler or a shmup or something like that. There's so many different genres out there and so many different great retro examples to kind of lean on knowledge-wise. Each of these kind of games should take anywhere between, say, 1 and 3 months of casual time to complete, weekends and spare time, that kind of thing. And some might think that this sounds like a long period of time, especially those who are used to these make a game in 48 hours or whatever. But once you start making games, you will quickly realize that things take a lot longer than expected. Setbacks always come up. And it's even more true if you're trying to take a game and trying to put it on a store, because there's a lot of hidden work around the admin side, uploading the screenshots, trailers, and of course, promotion and these little things that you have to continue doing along the way, especially during that last period before launch. So you've got to give yourself the time. And you can experience incredible growth as a game developer and designer during this phase. But most importantly, it teaches you how to finish a project, what it takes, and how that feels. This is critically important. It really is. if you skip this understanding of what it takes to finish, you're going to run into a wall down the track that's going to be incredibly difficult and painful. You might try to jump straight in and build a Zelda clone because that's what you've always wanted to do. You've been dreaming of it since you were a kid. And then you hit a brick wall and you just don't know how to finish it. You don't have the experience. You don't have that. It's not in your repertoire of skills as to how to wrap this thing up, how to tie a bow on it. It's not easy. And often it's been said that the last 10% takes as long as the first 90% or something like that. There's some kind of fun little metric that gets played out. Yeah, that situation can throw you into a dark abyss, man. If you get to that point in a game, and I've seen that time and time again, people who've spent years on projects and they get to a point and they just abandon it. Life changes during that period. A lot can happen. In my case, in the time I've been building my game, I got married, I had children. Things were very different when I started this project. And as a result, I've had to extend things out because, there's more important things in life to making games. So game dev, as much as it was a priority at one point in my life, I had to kind of shuffle that priority list a little bit. And the thing to remember is also, what good is an awesome game if nobody gets to play it? What's better? A great idea that you had that never gets done, or some kind of smaller scope idea that can be completed, people can play it, it can bring more creativity and joy into the world, because that's what games do, right? People play them and they get some kind of emotional feedback. So you're bringing this to the world, and if you just have a grand idea that never comes to fruition, then what good is it? And remember, game dev is not just the skill of programming or designing. It's organization, time management, understanding of your abilities. These things are critical skills in being a successful game creator, game developer. When you go to the gym, you don't just walk in for the first time and pick up the heaviest weight. You tear off your shoulder or rip some muscle. But rather you go and find an appropriate sized weight that matches your strength level, and you work on that and you progressively work your way up exponentially. And that's how I think of game dev. It's a muscle that has to be trained. Restraint is a skill. And as exciting as it is to dream up new and ambitious ideas filled with nostalgia and whatnot, if you can't finish one, you're not going to finish any. All right, so you've now spent some time in the trenches. You've been honing your skills. You've made a bunch of complete mini games of a few different genres. You've got some stuff out on itch. You've some good, some bad. Not all games are going to be good, especially when we're starting out. I definitely made my fair share of rubbish games, but I liked them and it was fun, and that's what's important. What we take from it is often not so evident. It's like it's the growth that is critical. That old saying, it's not the destination but the journey, and that's super important. So now you can take those skills and experience and embark on, let's say, a dream project. Something that you've always wanted to make, something like I was saying, maybe like it's some kind of Zelda RPG, Metroid procedural roguelite, or whatever kind of crazy game you've been thinking of. A project of this kind of nature will likely take years to complete, because most of us, especially if you're a bit older, you don't have necessarily the same amount of time as you would when you were younger, which is why if you're young, hit it hard, man, because as you progress through life, even though you think, you don't know what's around the corner, what kind of responsibilities will be dropped on you within 6 months. It's amazing how quickly life can move at a certain point. So you need fortitude to complete these big projects. Fortitude is the word I often think of. It's courage, resilience, because these large projects will really test you, and you will hit a lot of brick walls, mental, physical, emotional. There's a honeymoon period with projects. At the start, it's really fun. But without fail, no matter how exciting some idea is, you're going to hit this wall, the grind. It's like the desert, man. And you just got to push, push through it. And if you haven't got the fortitude, if you haven't got the cojones, you're going to die out there. It's going to kick you back out because you're not yet worthy. And once you traverse that desert and complete that kind of dream project, or however you want to refer to it, you join a special club of finishers, a very small percentage of developers who have actually accomplished that feat. There's a lot of game developers out there, millions. If you look at some of these leading YouTube channels like Brackies or whatever, they have like almost 1 million subscribers. So it's fair to say there's at least 1 million people trying to make some kind of indie games of various skill levels. And out of those, you probably have a very small percentage who are actually shipping games. And that's what you want to be looking at, shipping games. So you're trying to work your way up to this kind of place. And I'm too on that path with my game, Blood and Mead. Every weekend, I get tested when it's time to do work, because I have a very narrow window where I can actually get work done. And had I not taken time to sharpen those skills in the past on smaller game projects, I probably would have quit by now. Because even now I'm hitting these barriers where I feel like quitting, but I'm just pushing through because I've learned that fortitude and how to be resilient in that regard, but I'm still tested. And I can just imagine, had I not learned some of those skills in the past, I'd be faring a lot worse. So get out there, sharpen your swords, and don't rush. You have time. Just stick to it. One step at a time. These old sayings, they always come back, but they always ring true, like slow and steady wins the race. But this is not a race against other people. This is just you're competing with yourself. Game dev is very much it's a battle against yourself to see if you can make it or not. There's plenty of people playing games, though technically we are in competition with other game devs. You can't look at it like that. So anyways, get out there, take this time that you have. Hopefully you have some free time and go out there and make some games. Make your dreams come true. And just a quick thanks to my Patreon supporters who have been supporting me and this channel, keeping me motivated, helping me to create content for you guys. I really appreciate that. So thanks. If any of you want to become Patreon supporters and get your names up here, I'll drop a link down below. You get access to a bunch of game dev, making tools and scripts and things like that. And come see me on Discord if you guys want to chat. We have an active Discord community filled with very friendly and helpful developers. So I'd love to see you down there. All right, guys, all the best. See you in the next video and good luck on your game dev adventures.